apparently one of the prison guards in charge of overseeing Epstein's cell has broken his silence and is giving us information regarding Jeffrey Epstein and his time in prison that we've never heard before. This is new news that has just dropped that I want to look at and share with all of you today and break it down as we go. As many of us already believe, Jeffrey Epstein did not unalive himself, as has been stated in his cell years ago, that it was actually planned and done by someone else, or it was staged and he's actually alive somewhere in the world right now. Maybe we'll get some insight with this guard statement.
Donald Trump cannot keep this Epstein scandal out of the news or out of Congress's purview, even with what you see, a lot of other things going on today. The House Oversight Committee probing those last Epstein days, which were under the oversight of the Trump DOJ and Bill Barr. They heard from Tova Noel. That's a former corrections officer who was crucial in the period leading up to Epstein's death. This was private testimony. Noel had already told federal investigators, as we've mentioned in some of our prior reporting, that she believes, based on her service there, that she was the last person to see Epstein alive. She says, inmate counts around 10 p.m. After that check, she and a colleague, though, didn't do the other required checks. And as we showed you in this timeline where we meticulously used prior government information and newly revealed materials from the Epstein files, there were a lot of questions on how the Trump DOJ and Bill Barr's team dealt with what were those final days, questions of negligence or worse, before Epstein was allowed to do something that inmates are not supposed to be able to do in custody, which is allegedly take their own life or die.
I actually really like this timeline and how they break it down right here. It's giving us a really nice visual as to the actions that took place in the order that they did. Obviously, it being a timeline, that's what it's for, but it's nice to see in a visual way like this.
In another protocol violation, they failed to do required overnight checks. The inmate counts every 30 minutes, which was part of the protection and the whole point of having him in this special unit.
Question here. There's two things that we could look at here. One, is it that this is just how the prison guards always are? Do they always not do their job the way they're supposed to? Are they lazy? Do they just assume everything's going to be fine and they just kind of really don't do a good job at what they were hired for? Or were they not doing a good job specifically on this night because they were maybe told not to do a good job, or they were told to take it easy this evening because maybe something was going to be happening behind the scenes?
Instead, he's alone and unmonitored for 8 hours. This new law famously forced out the secret internal documents from the same probe, showing other views within the FBI about the last person near Epstein's cell. And that night, a blurry orange figure appears. The original FBI log calls it that flash of orange could possibly be an inmate. And note that careful description, because then the DOJ review of the same footage changes it to write, quote, inmates are currently on lockdown. It's possible someone is carrying inmate linen up the stairs. Was that a good faith mistake or a malicious cover-up? DOJ indicted the guards on duty that night for lying about the inmate checks that never happened. That's a big deal. It added pressure, though, for those guards to cooperate in the probe, and the DOJ later dropped those same charges.
I mean, you have to think the guards were trying to cover their own butts, right? Because they weren't doing their job properly. And they were trying to protect themselves when they were being questioned.
That's some of what we've been detailing. Congresswoman Stansbury, who was attending this high-stakes interview today, does describe Noel as forthcoming, saying they focused on the details of the night, some of which I touched on there, and those questions, and also discussing the loss of her job.
My takeaway is two things. One, the system once again failed survivors. It was clear incompetence and just a lack of oversight.
She does feel like her termination was unfair, and that had it not been Jeffrey Epstein, she would not have been fired.
She didn't do her job, but it seemed like people weren't doing their job generally at the MCC.
And that's what I was looking for right there. He just said it. People weren't doing their job generally. So it looks as if the staff here at this facility just weren't doing their jobs. They were not doing what they were required to do, which in this case is those checks.
We're now joined by Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury on that critical House Oversight Committee. Welcome back. What do you think Congress learned today that's important in a series of events that we and other outlets have documented showed incompetence, failures, if not worse, from the then Trump DOJ overseeing that prison.
Well, I certainly agree with my colleague from Virginia, which is that the system over and over again has failed survivors. And, you know, this was the first time that we've heard from Ms. Noel about her firsthand account of what happened that night. She herself stated in that interview that she does believe that it was a suicide, but she did say that there were irregularities, not just that evening, but in general, that there was understaffing, that she and her colleagues had been working long hours and doubles, that they had not done the normal checks. But my takeaway from the interview was not that it was unusual per Epstein. In fact, I asked her that question. Was there anything weird about that night or unusual about how the situation was handled? And she said no. But it's clear that the system was not well managed and that she feels, in her opinion, that she was terminated and indicated that it was unfair. Had it been any other inmate, the way the system was being managed, that she would not have been fired.
Well, I mean, of all the issues here, I don't think whether the guards were sanctioned in the right way is high on anyone's priority list. They failed to do the checks. The night they failed to do the checks, he's found dead. There were, as you know, allegations of the shredded documents that have now been proven. She may or may not have had visibility on that. But again, that goes to what was going on inside the prison. There were these payments. I wanted to ask you about this. That apparently you and your colleagues asked about financial payments she got in these increments before the Epstein death. She said that was from working overtime. Did that all scan to you? And do you think that she and others could shed any light on how Epstein got special treatment? Because while if it were chess, guards are like pawns, and the accountability doesn't stop with them, but I've read the IG report. Epstein was granted these exceptions. He was using the phone call. He had a final phone call leading up to the night of his death that was on the non-recorded line, which was only allowed because a different guard, I should mention, but a guard walked him to be allowed that. I mean, there's a lot of these type of problems. So your view on those issues and her credibility today?
I have a hard time really trusting and believing what we're hearing here from the guards, because the guards still have their guard up, trying to protect themselves and maybe even trying to fight for their job back because they were fired because of what happened. You can't blame the system, although I guess we can blame the system, but you are still responsible for your job, whether the system is run poorly or whether it's run well. If your job is to do checks every 30 minutes, if you've worked a double or a triple or whatever it may be, that is your job, to ensure the security and the safety of the inmates, which clearly wasn't done here, as Jeffrey Epstein was left alone for 8 hours alone in his cell. She also said that she didn't believe that he unalived, or she did believe that he unalived himself, but I have a hard time believing that. I don't know that, just knowing everything that we've learned about Jeffrey Epstein over the last few months, that he would be the kind of person that would give up and throw in the towel and say, this is it for me. I think that there are a lot of people who had a lot to lose if Epstein were to have spoken up in court in the following days from where he was in jail, that could have made something like this happen before I would believe that he did it to himself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only here to report on the actual deposition that I sat in parts of today. I can't speak to the broader management of the prison itself. But what I can say is that she did validate that there was special treatment of Jeffrey Epstein. She said that he was given access to a CPAP, that he had special sheets, and that all indications were that he was being given special treatment inside the jail. But I specifically asked her whether she felt that there were those inside the prison, either in the management or in the guards or other prisoners, who wished Jeffrey Epstein harm. And she said no. She also talked about witnessing the body as it was removed. So, there were absolutely irregularities in the prison, but I don't think that of the members and staff that were in the room, we walked away with the impression that outside of just blatant incompetence and mismanagement, that there was a larger conspiracy at hand based on her testimony. It doesn't mean that there wasn't, but based on what we witnessed in the room today. Now, with respect to these payments, what she stated in the room was that they were cash payments that she deposited herself. She said multiple times under oath that they had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein, but I offered her the opportunity at the end of the day to clarify the source of the payments, and she declined.
Yeah. So what would cash payments be? I mean, it doesn't sound like something that would be connected to normal employ.
It just doesn't seem honest. What we're hearing from the guard doesn't seem honest. The jail doesn't pay in cash. They pay you in your paycheck. So cash payments were definitely made by someone else for a different reason, and it definitely looks shady if you ask me. I honestly don't believe that we're getting any truth out of this deposition.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were other parts of the interview that happened while I was not in the room in which she clarified that she was working potentially other jobs and overtime. But like I said, during the portion of the interview where I asked if she wanted to clarify for the record, she declined.
I don't believe that the testimony that we're hearing from this guard or any other guards that will give testimony will actually be something that we can rely on and that will actually be truthful, because there's too much for them to have to protect their own butts, because I think they were too deeply involved in things that were wrongdoing to actually give any truth, because if they did, they'd be looking at criminal charges themselves. So this is very difficult to look at, to listen to, and say, oh, well, I guess Jeffrey Epstein really did do this to himself. And, oh, the guards were not being treated fairly and they were working too hard, which is the reason why they weren't doing their checks appropriately. These are all just excuses. And I don't believe that we've been given any additional insight from what we've already seen about Jeffrey Epstein and his passing in prison. I think we still need to do the actual deep dives to find the truth. To dive deeper into the Epstein files, check out this video. And guys, I'll see you over there.